Hello, and welcome to the Real Bundaberg. This is the way it is. Few issues are more capable of igniting public anger than politicians travelling at public expense. It is also one of the most difficult issues to judge fairly. The reality is that politicians, councillors, and senior public officials need to travel. Governments cannot be run entirely from behind a desk. Elected representatives need to meet ministers, advocate for funding, attend conferences, inspect projects, build relationships, and represent their communities. Sometimes the value of a trip can be many times greater than its cost, but travel is also one of the quickest ways for public confidence to unravel. The problem is not simply whether a trip was technically permitted under a policy. The questions the public asks are much more basic. Was it necessary? Was it worth our money? And who approved it? That is where the political danger begins. Travel can be legitimate and still look wrong. A trip can comply with every rule and still fail the public interest test. A politician may be entitled to fly business class, stay in a particular hotel, or attend a conference in another city or country. The paperwork may be correct. The expense may be approved. But if ratepayers or taxpayers are being asked to accept rising rates, higher taxes, service cuts, or cost of living pressures, expensive travel attracts a very different level of scrutiny. People inevitably ask, could the same outcome have been achieved more cheaply? Was the trip necessary? Why did that many people need to attend? What did the community actually gain? Could some meetings have been held online? Was the travel primarily about delivering results, or was the travel itself the event? Those are legitimate questions. The political damage is often about judgment, not rules. History shows that travel controversies can become politically explosive because they go directly to judgment. The public is often less interested in the fine print of an expenses policy than in what the spending says about the person making the decision. A relatively small expense can cause enormous political damage if it creates an impression of entitlement, extravagance, or a double standard. That is especially true when politicians are telling everyone to tighten their belts. A government can defend a trip by saying it was approved. A council can point to its travel policy. An elected representative can argue that all expenses were properly acquitted. But it was within the rules is not always a convincing political defence. The public interest standard is higher. There is another question that can be just as important as the cost of the travel itself. Who approved it? The approval process is crucial. In local government, for example, should a decision involving major travel expenditure be brought before a public council meeting where all councillors can consider it and the reasons for the expenditure are placed on the public record? Or can it be approved administratively, delegated to an individual, agreed by a small group, or settled behind closed doors? The distinction matters. When significant expenditure is debated at a public meeting, ratepayers can see the proposal before or as the decision is made. They can see who supported it, who opposed it, and what reasons were given. The expenditure becomes part of the democratic record. When the same decision is made outside the public chamber, the community may not know about it until the money has already been spent, if it becomes aware of it at all. That does not mean the decision was improper. Councils and governments need delegations and administrative processes to function efficiently. It would be impractical to bring every train fare, hotel booking or conference registration before a public meeting. But there is a point at which the scale, destination, number of travellers, or nature of a proposed trip makes it more than a routine administrative expense. At that point, the approval process itself becomes a matter of public interest. The issue is particularly sensitive in local government. Ratepayers can see very clearly where their money comes from. They receive the bill. When council rates rise sharply, every discretionary expense becomes more visible. Travel, conferences, accommodation, meals and delegations are no longer abstract accounting entries. They are being funded by households and businesses that may already be struggling with insurance, electricity, groceries, and housing costs. That does not mean councillors should never travel. It means the case for travel must be stronger, clearer, and more transparent. For every significant publicly funded trip, ratepayers should be able to find out who proposed the travel, who approved it, under what policy or delegation it was approved, who travelled and why, the estimated cost when approval was given, the final cost to the public, what meetings or events were attended, why those people needed to attend in person, whether less expensive alternatives were considered, whether the matter went before all elected representatives, whether there was a public debate and recorded vote, whether any conflicts of interest were declared, what measurable benefit was sought, and what outcome was achieved. These are not bureaucratic technicalities. They go to the heart of accountability for public money. Transparency should begin before the plane takes off. Too often, transparency occurs only after controversy begins. A journalist asks questions. A resident makes a right to information application. An expense appears months later in a disclosure register. Only then does the public begin trying to reconstruct what happened. That is transparency in reverse. For major publicly funded travel, the better principle is simple. The greater the cost, the stronger the case for public approval and disclosure before the money is spent. There will always be exceptions. Some travel may be urgent. Commercial negotiations may require confidentiality. Security or privacy considerations may limit what can be disclosed in advance. But those exceptions should not become the default. For significant local government travel, the public should reasonably expect to know what is proposed, why it is necessary, approximately what it will cost, who will travel, and who has approved it. If elected representatives believe a trip represents good value for their community, there should usually be little reason to hide the decision-making process. The answer is not no travel. A blanket ban would be foolish. Regional communities, in particular, need strong representation outside their own boundaries. Decisions affecting local roads, hospitals, water, housing, industry and infrastructure are often made in capital cities. If local leaders never leave home, the community can lose opportunities. Conferences can also be valuable. They can expose decision makers to new ideas, better technology, and solutions already working elsewhere. International travel can sometimes be justified too. But the further the destination and the greater the cost, the stronger the public interest case must be. The answer is not to stop travelling. The answer is to travel with purpose and to make the decision openly. A simple test: necessity, cost, process, and outcome. Before public money is spent, 4 questions should be asked. Was it necessary? Could the objective reasonably have been achieved another way? Was it cost-effective? Was the number of travellers justified? Were the transport, accommodation and other expenses reasonable? Was the approval process transparent? Who approved the expenditure? Was the decision made under a clearly identified policy or delegation? If the cost was significant, was there a good reason it did not go before elected representatives in a public meeting? What did the public get from it? Not vague claims about networking or raising the region's profile, but identifiable outcomes. A meeting secured, a funding application advanced, an investment opportunity created, a policy problem resolved, a partnership established, new knowledge brought back and put into practice. If there is no meaningful answer to the 4th question, the public is entitled to question the first 3. The process can matter as much as the destination. Political controversies over travel are rarely only about airfares and hotel bills. They are often about process. A costly trip openly proposed, publicly debated, properly costed and approved by elected representatives may be accepted by the community even if some people disagree with it. The same trip, approved behind closed doors and discovered only after the event, can produce a very different reaction. That is because secrecy creates its own political problem. It raises questions that might never have arisen if the process had been open from the beginning. Why was this not discussed publicly? Who made the decision? What information did they have? Were other elected representatives given a say? Would the public have known if nobody had asked? In politics, perception matters. But good governance should not be built around managing perceptions after the event. It should be built around decision-making processes that can withstand public scrutiny from the start. Transparency protects legitimate travel. Politicians often treat questions about travel expenses as criticism. That is a mistake. Transparency is the best protection for travel that is genuinely necessary. Publish the purpose before the trip. Publish the estimated cost. Explain who approved it. Publish the full cost afterwards. Publish the itinerary within reasonable privacy and security limits. Then report back on what was achieved. If the trip delivered real value, say so and show the evidence. If the expected result did not eventuate, say that too. Public money does not come with a guarantee that every initiative will succeed, but it does come with an obligation to explain how it was spent. The political lesson is this: travel will always be a political risk because it sits at the intersection of necessity, privilege, and public money. Done well, it can deliver opportunities that would never have happened otherwise. Done badly, it can become a symbol of everything voters believe is wrong with government. And when households are being asked to pay more, the tolerance for perceived extravagance becomes very small indeed. The standard should not be whether politicians and public officials travel. It should be whether they can look the people who paid for the trip in the eye and clearly answer 4 questions. Why did you need to go? Why did it cost that much? Who approved it, and how openly was that decision made? What did we get for our money? Because in public life, the cost of a trip is not always measured only in dollars. Sometimes it is measured in trust.